Good morning everybody and welcome to today's meeting of the Cabinet Committee Local Issues. Today is the 15th of April and it's 10 o'clock and we are now live. So we'll start off with members of the committee. So I've got myself, Councillor Graham Turner, who's chairing today's meeting. And
good morning, I'm Councillor Ahmed, the panel member and also the Cabinet member for Environment and Highways.
Thank you, and we've received apologies this morning from Councillor Moses Crook. Minutes of the previous meeting, can we approve those today? Yep.
Are they in the pack?
I don't know. No. So we'll approve those minutes anyway. This morning from the last meeting. Okay, so we'll move on to item 3, then the declarations of interest. No, neither of us have any declaration of interest or peculiar interest to declare. Admission of the public. This is a public meeting, so the members of the public are here this morning, so thank you very much for attending. Deputations or petitions, I believe we have none. No. So we'll move on to item 6, public question time. I presume you will want to speak at the specific items when we get to those. Okay, so we'll move on from public question time. Member question times, we have no further elected members here, so there's no member question time. So we'll move straight on to, we've got quite a busy agenda today, so we'll move on to item 8. So if you could be, when you speak, if you could be, stick to about 5 minutes. I'll be flexible if you've got an interest. If it's an interesting point, it moves on a bit, but as I said, we've got quite a lot of speakers this morning, quite a lot to get through, so your help in getting through this agenda would be appreciated, but that's not to stop you making your points. So item 8, proposed casualty prevention scheme on Woodhouse Hill, Central Avenue and Woodhouse Hall for our town, associated with the Huddersfield Trust School Expansion Programme. So I'll hand over to officers to introduce this and then we'll take questions from the members of the public. So who's leading on this one?
Hello. This scheme came around for 2 reasons that kind of aligned with each other. We were already looking at this section of Woodhouse Hill because it came up on our annual accident suite where we look at all the collisions across the borough and try and identify sites where we have problems with people being injured and then come up with solutions to resolve those problems. There have been a number of collisions along Woodhouse Hill in this locality of this scheme and elsewhere further to the north. Some of them were related to the traffic calming features that are in situ now. There are carriageway narrowings there with give-way markings at the moment. And there's some evidence that occasionally drivers race to try and get through them quickly. So the initial thought at that time was to try and replace those with something more conventional, like road humps. Around that time, we became aware of the expansion of Woodhouse School, the NHT school, because we get consulted on all planning applications. That led to some communication with the school to find out what the expansion was about, where it transpired. They were adding another 150 pupils, 16% or whatever it was. We entered into discussions with the education department at that time and told them of our intentions to look at this wider section of road. However, due to our budgets being limited in that year, we didn't have a lot of money for this scheme. Following the discussions with the education department, they agreed to make a financial contribution towards the scheme, and we agreed to focus the scheme around the school for now, for this current financial year, around Central Avenue, Woodhouse Hall Road junctions, and to collaborate with the school about what we wanted to do there. That led to the development of the scheme that we're here about now, which basically seeks to achieve 2 main aims. One is to remove the existing narrowing and replace it with a conventional road hump, and then to provide 2 additional road humps, one further down Woodhouse Hill and one on Woodhouse Hall Road, and to, in collaboration with that, to make the route to and from the school for pupils walking on foot much safer and easier. That was basically driven by the fact that 4 of the collisions we looked at involved school pupils being injured in this area, in the immediate vicinity of these 2 junctions. When we looked at the scheme, there had also been historical injury accidents involving vehicles turning at Central Avenue, and that led to the conclusion that if we could, the best way to do this would be to close Central Avenue, to take those vehicle manoeuvres out of the equation, because a lot of the school pupils, that's on their desire line, to walk between Central Avenue and the school and to cross the road there. That led to the proposals as they are now, including the road hump opposite the closed section of Central Avenue, which provided a much wider crossing and a humped-up crossing with traffic islands on either side to slow cars down as they approach that location. We also are seeking to realign Woodhouse Hall Road slightly, because at the moment left turns out of Woodhouse Hall Road can be quite fast because the radius is very loose and sweeping, and we wanted to put another road hump with a crossing further down from Woodhouse Hall Road junction, which also led to moving the bus stop further south, and that basically is the scheme as you see it now. When we consulted the school were happy with the proposals, but they also requested that we put school keep clear markings and no loading restrictions at the end of Woodhouse Hall Road in the cul-de-sac, because they have problems there with congestion in the morning. The school keep clear markings are supported by an order to make it illegal to actually stop anywhere on those markings during school changeover periods in an effort to resolve that problem. We originally also put no loading restrictions around the end of Central Avenue, in addition to the no waiting restrictions, with a view to keeping it clear so that people could do three-point turns at the end of the cul-de-sac and get back out in the other direction. But on reflection and on advice from Karen in the TRO section who's sitting behind me, because we had objections, we took those out, because legally you can't stop people stopping to pick up or put down people anyway. So the loading restrictions are seen as unnecessary on Central Avenue, because I wasn't aware of that, I'll admit that. I presumed it meant you couldn't load anything, but you can load people. So if parents, for example, wanted to stop on them and let the kids get in and out of the cars, it wouldn't stop that. So we took those out of the proposals. We went through consultation. We consulted 370 thereabouts addresses in and around this area and around the bordering area. I recall we had about 5 or 6 responses to the initial consultation. They were all focused on the same thing. They were all generally negative, and they were about the closure of Central Avenue and the inconvenience that would cause people who currently drive via Central Avenue and Woodhouse Hill Junction on their journeys, and their objections were based around that the detours were too far, the surrounding roads were unsuitable. A few people mentioned the junction with Ashbrow Road, is it, at the top? Ashbrow Road, and that was an unsuitable junction for manoeuvres. They also mentioned speeds along Central Avenue and Woodhouse Avenue. Subsequent to that, I got traffic surveys done. It turned out that speeds were at the levels we'd want them to be. Around 99% of drivers were abiding to the 30 limit. 85% of drivers were travelling around 20 mile an hour or lower. So I didn't see any evidence to support the claim that people were driving radically along Central Avenue or Woodhouse Avenue. We subsequently advertised the proposals, and we received 1 formal objection, which I'm guessing is the lady who's here today. I don't think there's much else I can say at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a fairly detailed response to the report. So I've got, does Frank Chamberlain wish to speak?
Hello, yeah. You've answered some of my questions. I don't understand where, with the rearrangement of traffic flows, where the cars are going to go. So, you know, in the morning, transition time, Central Avenue's packed, Woodhouse Hill's packed. There are cars ignoring all of the road markings that are there anyway. What happens if you restrict access there? Does it just move further along the road? Does it create more risk than it actually removes?
Do you wish to reply?
From what I've seen during school changeover times down there, I honestly can't answer your question. You're right. The whole area, including remote to where this scheme is, has got problems, and we had a lot of letters that supported this scheme, but also mentioned right down at the bottom of Woodhouse Hill and elsewhere. So obviously there is going to be some migration. I suspect a number of parents will use Central Avenue, the closed section, to go and drop the kids off, and that might cause problems, particularly in the short term when it first opens, until people realise how much room there is and whether or not it's going to be convenient to do so. But as for the rest of it and the way they behave, I agree, and I can't disagree with what you're saying. It's more of a national problem than an NHT school problem that parents choose to take the kids and drop them off in the car rather than making them walk, and the problems it creates. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see where the migrated vehicles go that currently take that route. But yes, on the surrounding network, I presume it won't lead to some tidal change in the way that kids travel to school. So, you know, we'll just have to see. But I understand your concerns.
Also, given the change that you've just mentioned, that we can't stop people dropping off children in Central Avenue when it's closed, what will happen? I mean, presumably people can park there as well. I mean, that might be a good thing, but is that...
People will be able to drop the kids off in Central Avenue. The waiting restrictions are just focused around the end of it in an attempt to keep that section clear so people can execute 3-point turns. So I do believe a number of parents will still go down Central Avenue, drop the kids off, do a 3-point turn and go back out again. It doesn't stop that behaviour. It does stop it on the majority of Woodhouse Hall Road, which is the cul-de-sac leading down to the school, because the school headmaster was very keen to see that because of the problems it causes directly outside the school entrance. So it won't stop parents using Central Avenue to drop the kids off.
Sorry, I wasn't clear about that. I understood that, but would it stop people parking there?
It will stop people parking, as in waiting, parking up, leaving the car, walking away. It won't stop a parent from pulling up, letting the kid get out, and then manoeuvring and going out, which, if it's only going to take a few seconds, is unlikely to make any major difference to how congested it gets, depending on how many parents actually choose to go down there. But it's only a small section of Central Avenue at the end that's restricted. The rest of it is as now.
Just for ease, can you go through the chair so we can pass those on to officers? Just for ease of who's speaking at the time. Yeah. Just following on from that, and as you rightly pointed out, this is not unique to this school, it's not unique to Kirklees, it's a national problem where people choose to drive their children to school, in some cases relatively short distances, and all we can do is we can do the best we possibly can to protect those children who chose to walk to school. If you look at 1.2 of today's report, there's been quite a significant amount of personal injury collisions, and we must do everything to protect our children and reduce those. So the scheme we've got is what we've got at the moment, and we'll have to, as the officer rightly points out, we will have to see how that works in reality, because the great British public will always find a way of doing things that we don't anticipate. So we'll have to see. It could be that at some point in the future, if this scheme is approved today and is implemented, that there's a role for enforcement to go down and have a look at what's going on there. But I think that's probably, should this go through, that'll be, once this is implemented, maybe the enforcement can go down and have a look and see, and just try and reinforce with parents and others dropping children off that perhaps their behaviour isn't appropriate, and perhaps we should find alternative methods. But that's just my opinion. So I've got Lucy Smith, if she wishes to speak.
Yes, thank you. So as a parent of a child who's been hit outside a school, a different school in the area, I have full compassion for, wanting to make sure that children going to school are safe. But I also am very concerned about this intervention that you're doing. I don't think it's going to make it any safer. Actually, I think it could potentially increase the risks, because you're going to squish all of the traffic now down Woodhouse Avenue. I think it's potentially more dangerous. I'm concerned that despite the fact that there seems to be funding from the Department of Education, that there is not really a proper environmental and transport solution here. There's not any wider thinking about how we can transport children safely to a school. At the minute, what happens is, as you've pointed out, potentially on a national scale. We have parents driving up to the end of the junction, parking their cars on the end of the junction, or just stopping in the middle of the junction, opening all 4 doors of the back and children pouring out. They park on double yellow lines. They don't care. They don't care about sight lines, about anything. You know, it's very difficult if you're driving around there as a local resident. Where are the plans for, you know, busing children into school, or making safer pedestrian access, or perhaps creating a road that went round to the back of the school? This school has such limited car access, and you're increasing the pupil numbers, but you're not actually improving any access for cars for staff or pupils or parents or special needs kids. You know, we need to be thinking much bigger and requesting further funding for this. This is not going to be a successful intervention, and ultimately I fear you're going to waste money. And sorry, one last point is, you know, you're creating some keep clear signs. Who's going to enforce that? Is that just through the speed trap, or is there going to be some other enforcement? Because our you know, experience of living in the area is that there's no enforcement of double yellow lines around the area. There's no enforcement against parents who are just you know, parking on double yellow lines at corners. They do it every day because they know they can, and nobody's going to stop them. Thank you.
Anything you wish to add to that? Or yep.
Regarding the school keep clears, the reason we put them in with a supporting order was to enable us as a local authority to prosecute people for stopping on them. That's the specific reason. So during school changeover times, we'll be able to send enforcement people out there to prosecute any drivers that stop on them. Regarding encouraging more pupils to walk to school, I agree with you, and I'll let Phil or Karen just mention mode shift and what that is doing to that end.
Thank you, Dean. I can confirm that we do promote Mode Shift Stars. It's a national school scheme which encourages mode shift, change of ways to get to school, sustainable travel, air quality, everything of those sorts. And we've actually got the school working with our road safety team now. Hopefully with more commitment from them. We have seen major improvements around some schools, and they are pressuring them to take on these initiatives and promote them and try and change behaviour of the parents. We know it's not easy, we know it's not a quick fix, but we are looking to do it and we are working on it. Thank you.
Councillor Ahmed?
Can I just share the sentiments of the objector in terms of being a parent and the issues that you've raised? So we fully understand and appreciate where you're coming from in terms of that, and it's a problem, and a national problem, as well as a regional and a Kirklees problem in terms of schools and dropping off and picking up in terms of the children. So I completely accept and take on board what you're saying in terms of a proper environmental transport plan which is linked to the education. So that's something that we as Kirklees Council do look into, and will continue to look into that in terms of the safety of any schools, wherever. But it is a problem all throughout the whole of Kirklees and nationally as well. So your sentiments are there, but we can only do what we can in terms of the circumstances where we are, and there are limitations, and it's to try and make sure that we can actually make the environment and the place as safe as possible, and that's the whole intentions of the proposals that have been put forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Just going back to the issue of enforcement, one of the problems we have is we've got hundreds of schools in Kirklees, and this probably happens at every single one of those, and we don't have enough enforcement officers, and that's financial restrictions on how many we can afford to employ. So we could stick one outside every school, I've no doubt, every day, and we see some positive results, but unfortunately, in a world where resources are limited, we can't do that. But as I said, if there's a proven problem with enforcement, there's no reason why we can't enforcement to go out on an ad hoc basis, and it's especially if it's an ad hoc basis, because if they go 2-3 days in a row, they start to change their minds. You need to go and catch them, so it has to be ad hoc basis and go every so often when they don't least expect you. And that works with parking tickets in some of our smaller villages where we see pavement parking. So that enforcement team is there, but it's not huge, and they do a tremendous job to keep our villages and schools as safe as they possibly can within the resource envelope we provide them with. So yes, I think we should look at some enforcement visits, but as I said, that will be on a ad hoc basis because every school would like an enforcement officer. So, but let's look at it. We are committed to West Yorkshire's Vision Zero to reduce road accidents and serious injuries over a time period. And as I say, at 1.2, the amount of injuries that's been outside this school, it's clear that something needs to be done. I don't think anybody would deny that. Those numbers are quite horrific. 6 personal injuries occurred July 23 onwards. That's quite a significant amount of injuries. We've done fantastic work over the last good few years in Kirklees to reduce the number of fatalities and serious road injuries, and we have to continue that work. And whilst in an ideal world, we will probably come up with something much better than the scheme we have. We are limited by budgets, we are limited by housing, the road network. So I think this is the best scheme we can come up with in the circumstances. And I think it's morally the right thing to do to protect our young children from the risk of harm, which is clearly evidence in this case that there is a risk to them. So I'm proposing that we accept this proposal.
Yeah. Before I accept the proposals, I just want to say that the objections have been noted, and they're the ones that we completely do accept. That there's a national problem, we need to do something about it. But it outweighs the advantages in terms of the safety to the public and also to the environment around there. So for those reasons, you know, I'd like to obviously propose that we consider the recommendations that have been made.
Thank you. So we both in agreement that we'll accept this?
Yes, I accept this word. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, officers. Thank you, members of the public, for bringing your opinions and voicing those very strongly, and we do take those on board. But as I said, the number of injuries outside that school is high, and we must do something to reduce that number, because next time it could be a fatality rather than a serious injury. So thank you very much. Which officer's leading on this one? Will. Thank you very much. Will.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Will Aker, I'm the Head of Service for Operational Services, so you can tell that this one's been around for a while. I'm turning up today. So this is a long-standing issue in the valleys around a series of roads which has had some significant damage done to them and a significant antisocial behaviour. There's been a few attempts by us in the past in terms of some temporary road closures and exploring some experimental public space protection orders, which have not quite dealt with the issue. They did in some ways, but not in the long term. So what we did last year was start to consult on a longer term change under a traffic regulation order that would create a permanent solution, is what we're hoping to do. At the moment, these series of roads are a mixture of highways and boats and bridleways, so pretty much anyone in any machinery can go down them. We've seen some quite significant damage to some of the roads to the point where they've been down to bedrock. The council has been subject to magistrate court orders as well under the Highways Act, and have got some legal agreements in place to return some of these roads to certain levels, and there's £300,000 worth of investment gone into Ramsden Road, for example, and there's still a little bit of a phase left to complete. But that's essentially been rebuilding the road in its entirety. Some of these people who have been using this, not for leisure, but just for their type of fun, has pulled blocks down, they've damaged drainage, they've filled in all sorts of things that should be there have been blocked up. So what we're intending to do on this order is limit access. Along there's quite a lot of farming, there's the Yorkshire water sites, there's other residents that need access, so it's not been as simple as just blocking off the entirety of these roads. We've had to introduce a bit of a mix of some gated access, some key-coded access, and some blocks that we're proposing to drop in. Part of this, the Scaler Gate end, has been built upon the temporary closure that was a few years ago, which was quite successful in managing the behaviour there, and the Ramsden Road is a newer proposal, which was going to be subject to an experimental PSPO, but that never came to fruition. But we've installed some gates there which we're intending to use. They're currently locked open. We'd intend to close them and put some key code access on those for people who have rights of access in there. In terms of objections, I don't think anyone's really objected to us doing something about this behaviour. Most of the objections are around about the level of limitations that we were intending to put in place. Most of the sort of objections, I'd say, are around about the continued access of two-wheel powered vehicles. As we've been through the consultation, we've met with many constituted motorcycle groups. We've spoke to other local authorities around the country that's had similar issues. And we've proposed to introduce a permit system that will allow motorised vehicles, but only subject to signing up to our code of conduct and to having a valid permit. So Appendix 4 has the details of that, but the intention is that this is a way of us managing access to the right people who, you know, are legitimately using it for leisure. They're not causing issues to other people. They have the existing rights of way now. So we've decided to put that in to manage it. Some of the challenges we have in terms of sort of two-wheeled motorcycles is if we are allowing horses to continue to access, it makes it very difficult to manage and limit access to motorbikes as well. So the permit is trying to say, well, we still want horses to access, therefore we need a way of managing the motorcycles in a reasonable way. It allows us to enforce it. It allows us to put an onus on those who were successful in applying for a permit to tell us when there's damages, tell us when there's antisocial behaviour as well, and become a bit more of an eyes and ears permit system. And it also allows any sort of our partners, such as police, etc., to also rightfully challenge people who are using those routes to see if they have valid permits, and we can have the rights to revoke those as well. So overall, while there has been some objections, we would ask the sort of panel to agree the recommendations and to agree that the overall proposals and the benefits of it outweigh those objections that we've received. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Will. So we have a number of speakers on this. So have we got Patricia Stubbs here? So Patricia, if you'd like to say a piece.
Thank you for your time and for the opportunity to speak to you about the TRO proposal. I'm here representing the Peak District Green Lanes Alliance and the Peak Horsepower Bridleway Group. We are continuing to object to the TRO as proposed, as it fails to protect non-motorised users. The officer paper advising you today says that the reason for making this TRO is, and I quote, to avoid the risk of further significant damage to the routes. But the legal grounds that Kirklees cites for making this TRO go well beyond preventing damage to surfaces. The legal grounds you are using include, and I'm quoting, for avoiding danger to persons or traffic, for facilitating the passage of traffic, and for preserving the character of the road, especially suitable for walking or horse riding. Those are your legal grounds that you're citing under your legal powers. The TRO proposes excluding all 4x4s, but permitting use by motorcyclists if they acquire a permit. But there has been no public consultation at all on the nature of the proposed permit scheme, a scheme that places no limit at all on the number of motorcyclists able to get a permit and use the routes. Kirklees acknowledges that motorcycles are doing damage. It's not just 4x4s. Allowing an unlimited number of motorcyclists to have permits will not reduce motorcycle use or avoid significant further damage. It is motorbikes, not 4x4s, that present the greatest risk to horse riders and walkers. This is the case where there are dangerous ruts, and where sight lines are poor, routes are narrow, and there is nowhere that walkers and horse riders can get safely out of the way of oncoming vehicles. In these circumstances, allowing an unlimited motorcyclist use will defeat the other three purposes of the TRO, regardless of the existence of a code of conduct. The inherent character of the routes means that the TRO, as proposed, will continue to place walkers and equestrians in danger, impede their passage, and fail to preserve the character of the roads as especially suitable for walking and horse riding. We made these points in our response to the consultation, but they appear not to have been reported or considered. Even if the permit scheme is adopted as proposed, how can it be monitored and enforced? How would Kirklees prevent non-permit holders from using these routes? In summary, the proposed permit scheme cannot be enforced, and it cannot deliver the aims of the TRO, the legal aims that you are relying on. Kirklees should start again, yet again. I know it's been hard, and I know you've tried before, but you're not there yet. And you should propose a full TRO, including motorbikes. As an absolute minimum today, you should adopt Officer Recommendation number 2, i.e. reconsult on the proposals, having allowed the public to fully understand the permit scheme and its implications. Finally, horse-drawn carriages have the legal right to use these routes. There is nothing in the public domain about how they will have access. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to that? Well, I'll go through the rest of the questions.
I can respond now.
Right, okay, thank you.
So in terms of the consultation, the speaker's correct that we didn't reconsult on the permit scheme. It was something developed through the consultation process. However, as we've sort of covered that point off on page 2 and 3 of the report, that the revised proposal was not subject to further consultation, given that this is a public and transparent process in making this decision. So the decisions that were made, the amendments that were made to the permit scheme through the original consultation process are all visible. They've been visible for a number of weeks on our websites, and obviously people are here today being able to give their opinions and their thoughts on it. So we thought there was sort of no real purpose in reconsulting, given everyone who had an opinion would have the opportunity to come here today, or to phone in, or to send forward their further thoughts and opinions on it. So that's why we thought it was a bit of a waste of time, because people would be here. In terms of where we are today, I think it's important to set the context again. These are byways open to all traffic. There are highways. The current existing position is that people can legally and rightfully use these in four-wheel drive vehicles, in motorcycles. What this proposal is, there's some bridleways in the middle, but the proposal is that this is seeking to limit and reduce the impact. So it's a betterment than we are today. But we also have to recognise, as the Highways Authority and the Council, that there are legitimate users of these routes that want to continue and have an existing right to continue to use them on motorcycles. We've sought to balance the impact of this. And as I said, if we're allowing horses in, the physical barriers that you need will mean that motorcycles will be able to get in. There's nothing really that stops them. And in introducing this permit scheme, which has been successful in places like Kent, I believe was the one that was almost a template we copied, has allowed control on them. We have our parking teams, which will monitor the whitelist. They'll be the teams that look at issuing the permits. They'll be the teams that are looking at any public opinion that comes back, anything that's reported from people who are using them. You know, it's not just the council that can feed back into this, it's any users of these routes are able to tell the council if they've seen behaviour that's not in line with the permit scheme or the code of conduct. We have the right and ability to withdraw that and stop that person using it, and we have the right and ability to work with our partners such as the police as well. Who I think will welcome this scheme, given that, you know, they're trying to solve the same issues, and they've also, as it says within the report, been quite vocal in trying to get the council to work with them to resolve some of these very tricky issues that have been going on for quite some time. In terms of what the legal powers were, I think we are trying to cover all of them. They're again on page 2. You know, that we are avoiding dangers to person or traffic because we are improving the position that we are today. We're trying to prevent damage to the road or buildings. Obviously, the main people that have been damaging these have been the 4x4s, who have been actively modifying their vehicles to come and damage the routes. We have seen some two-wheel and motorcycle vehicles with some behaviour, but they are not the people that do the biggest damage to the road surface. Again, facilitating passage of traffic and preserving the character of the road, they sort of go together with what's travelling on top of it. In terms of horse carriages, at the moment we would class those as four-wheeled vehicles, so we would only be allowing people who are riding to travel through, not people who are in four-wheel carriages.
Thanks, Will. So I'll bring in Daniel Redman.
Morning. You'll have to forgive me, I'm pretty new to this kind of process. Just bear with me. Firstly, and above all, we should not forget that the routes which we are discussing today as part of these proposals are, and have been for a very long time, legal rights of way for use by motorised vehicles. There are many more points I would have liked to discuss today, but I have tried to keep what I have to say to the 5 minutes I am allowed. Reading other objections on this particular proposal, we can see that all the usual big hitters with a vast amount of experience on these types of issues are naming cases, reports and paragraph numbers to try and add weight to their point of view, an end goal which is ultimately to exclude another group of people using roads that they feel only a section of society like themselves should be allowed to use. This is a view based on discrimination and exclusion. My view and proposal, which will follow, is based on inclusion, education and cooperation. The fact that motorised vehicles have a legal right to use these roads is a fact that has been easily forgotten by many who have set out to ban them. And just because a road has an unsealed surface, they are somehow fair game to restrict use. I would now like to address a couple of points that have been made by the objectors. I know there will be a small amount of what may be considered by some as unsafe situations occurring on these roads. However, we must remember, as with any road in the country, not every single road user will drive perfectly 100% of the time. One objector who rode a horse, but this applies to walkers and cyclists too, mentioned a possible unsafe situation of meeting vehicles on unsighted bends and used this as one of a number of reasons to ban motorised vehicles. Personally, if I thought there was a possibility of putting myself or my horse in any danger at any point on a particular route because of other parties using that route, then I would choose a route where this type of situation would not occur. Not forget these parties have the legal right to use them and then seek to ban the other parties. Another objection mentioned people driving at inappropriate speeds. People drive at inappropriate speeds past my house regularly, but never has it occurred to me to try to ban traffic on the route. If there were no unsealed roads nearby, I doubt this objector would even consider forgetting people legally allowed to drive vehicles on the route and try and have them banned. I choose these 2 points in particular out of the majority of objections which are based in the fact that the objector has chosen to ignore that motorised vehicles are legally allowed to use these routes and therefore using discrimination and exclusion masked as safety concerns as their main drivers to propose a future solution to suit themselves rather than everybody. I can see the council have suggested an alternative to full closure with a permit system, which on the surface seems a sensible approach. But this is unworkable in reality for various reasons. you won't be able to police it, and it's basically cutting out people who live on these routes as well. However, I have to say I am disappointed in the council for taking the view that they have over the last few decades once again to choose to consider the option to change the status of these types of routes, and instead, like in many other countries and a handful of councils in the UK, view them as the assets that they are and look to protect how they are used. Me and some friends, we put all these proposed locations in a grid on the OS maps. This area covers 40 square kilometres, not including the routes outside of this, close to the routes we're discussing today. There are approximately 140 kilometres of footpaths and bridleways in this same area. How is this not enough? Why do the majority of objectors want to take the last route solely for themselves? My plan for the future would be to put signage at all proposed closure points to inform all users about to enter on these routes, who exactly is entitled to use these routes, what conditions you are likely to experience, for example, the road surface, gradients. Remind people that everyone should be courteous to other road users. There are numerous other routes. The previously mentioned 140 kilometres of alternative routes that other people can use. This is a proposal based on inclusion, education and cooperation, not discrimination and exclusion.
Thank you very much for those comments.
I don't think there's really a response, but I think it helpfully demonstrates some of the counter positions that we as officers are trying to listen to through people at this point in time have a legal right to use them. I've met with the Motorcycle Action Group, with the Trail Riders Fellowship to listen to some of these views that have just been presented, to see how we can perhaps preserve some of these routes for those people who enjoy these as a leisure, who behave in the correct way, who use them in the correct way, and there's some of the things within Appendix 4 in the Code of Conduct are actually copied and mirrored across from some of these organisations and constituted groups' Code of Conduct as well. So something within this should be mirrored across the piece, and I think it's the permit is trying to set a level of behaviour that's acceptable and safe for all users, in a way that's controlled still for those that don't want to behave that way and don't want to use the routes in this way. So it was trying to present a balance, but I think you'll probably appreciate, Chair, that there's quite a lot of strong, passionate people in the valleys that want to use these for various things, and the entire proposal is about trying to find the right balance.
Thanks, Will. Diana Mallinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of Gleam, which is an organisation which campaigns for the rights of walkers, horse riders, pedal cyclists, carriage drivers and the disabled to use green lanes, byways open to all traffic and unsealed, unclassified roads, without danger, difficulty and inconvenience caused by recreational motor vehicle use. There are several inaccuracies in the objection report which invalidate its recommendation of allowing motorcyclists to use these routes by permit. For example, page 1 of the report, as Mr. Akeley has said, says that motorcycle access will remain available because access has to be maintained for horse riders. But other authorities have made TROs which are effective in stopping motorcyclists. Examples include the 7 traffic TROs made by Peak District National Park Authority between 2014 and 2019, only one of which uses barriers to stop cars, and TROs made in 2014 and 2024 by Lincolnshire County Council on sections of the Viking Way, which are unsealed, unclassified roads, to facilitate their use by walkers, cyclists and horse riders. Cheesegate Knabside, Ramsden Lane and Ramsden Road are part of the Kirklees Way, a similar long-distance way which Kirklees Council, developed for walkers in the 1990s and is therefore very similar to the Viking Way. Mr. Acornley mentioned the Kent permit scheme. That has not worked because the police have now had to get involved because the users who are allowed to, motorists who are allowed to use it by permit, are not reporting antisocial behaviour and damaging behaviour by other permit holders. The police have had to mount special operations to try and stop that use. On page 2 of the report, it says that the routes affected include bridleways. They do not. TROs are not necessary on bridleways and footpaths because unauthorised use of them by motorists is already illegal. In contrast, the police cannot take action against motorists, car drivers or motorcyclists who cause nuisance and or damage on these routes unless there is a TRO prohibiting recreational motor vehicle use. Page 3 does not explain how illegal motorcycle use, e.g. the unregistered motorcycles, will be prevented. Page 4 says that the temporary TROs on Scaligate and Scar End Lane, which banned all recreational motor vehicle access, were effective in stopping the damage, which is mainly due to motorcyclists, to land adjacent to the eastern end of Scaligate and the southern end of Scar End Lane. This means that a permanent TRO which banned all recreational motor vehicles, including motorcycles, from these routes would also be effective in stopping this damage. Page 5 says that the TRO would significantly reduce the volume of motor vehicles on the routes and so benefit Kirklees' climate change and air quality strategy. But the TRO will not have a significant positive effect for Kilnbent Road, where Peak District National Park Authority's logging of motor vehicle numbers showed that motorcycles greatly exceed other motor vehicles. Page 6 acknowledges that motorcycles cause damage to the route, but officers are relying on the number of motorcyclists applying for permits as a measure of the level of motorcycle use, rather than using vehicle loggers to monitor total motorcycle numbers. You are not proposing to repair the routes other than Ramsden Road, so the damage caused by motorcycles to the other routes will continue to worsen, making Scaligate, Scar End Lane and Cheesegate Knapside even more difficult for non-motorised users than they already are. The Code of Conduct will not stop motorcycle damage to the unfenced triangle of land between Oldgate and Rakehead Road, given that the notices put up jointly by you, the police, Yorkshire Water and Natural England on this land have not been effective in stopping this damage. Nor will the Code of Conduct stop motorcyclists leaving Ramsden Road to drive on and damage the disused unfenced quarry adjacent to the route. Page 7 says that complaints from vulnerable users will continue if the proposed TRO is not made because of the objections. But the complaints from vulnerable users relate to motorcycle use as much as to 4x4 use. So making the TRO as proposed will not resolve these complaints. In late 2007, you received a petition asking for a TRO prohibiting off-road motor vehicles, 4x4s, quad bike and motorcycle use of Ramsden Lane and Ramsden Road because of the problems such use was already causing for walkers, cyclists and horse riders and the environment. At that time, Cabinet asked officers to discuss the issue with Peak District NPA, but nothing effective has happened in the years since 2007. Again, in contrast to successful TROs made by the National Park Authority. And the proposed TRO is likely to be ineffective because it does not prohibit motorcycles. Gleam asks that the Cabinet Committee Local Issues ask officers to reconsult on a TRO which prohibits recreational motorcycle use, as well as other recreational motor vehicle use, for the reasons set out above. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have you anything to add to that, Will, at this moment in time? Or?
Of course. I can't hold my peace, can I? No. No, I thank everyone who's come today, because like I said, you can see the passion in people, the people care about these routes, and, you know, we welcome engagement with people who use these routes, because, you know, we talked about maintenance of them, and we are holding those discussions at a combined authority level about the importance of these routes, because there's something called CRSTS, which is another acronym, which is basically the settlement for maintaining our roads that's come from government into combined authority and down into local authorities to maintain our road network. And what wasn't recognised in the first phase of that was the importance of our public rights of way, was the fact that we don't have a huge amount of budget left as an authority to maintain these rights of way. And so there are conversations going on at regional level now as we get this second phase of CRSTS to say we need to recognise the importance of this. And so in terms of future investment and future maintenance of PROW, we are pushing for that on a regional and national agenda. So while there's no particular plans other than low-level maintenance that our PROW team do, within there, we are hoping that this will open the doors to some quite significant capital coming into this area to look at these other routes and to look at our PROW network in general, because it is almost as big as the actual highway network itself. In terms of when I've been talking about preventing access to horses and vehicles and motorcycles, generally discussions been around physically being able to stop. So legally, you can stop. We've tried many different proposals in other areas of the borough around bars, T-bars, other ways of trying to prevent motorcycles from accessing where a horse can access, and to be quite frank, they haven't worked. Motorcycles can access, and while legally we could put a TRO in that says you're not allowed to go in there, we know that practically in some of these locations they will still enter them. So that's why we moved to looking at how do we actually control people who have accessed these routes, who are on these routes, to make sure that they're behaving in the way that they should be behaving, and those that don't have the right permit or aren't behaving in the right way, we can do something. And I know there was a mention of Kent again, but you know, I don't shy away, and I welcome working with our police partners. I think they should be working with us on these. It can't be only wholly reliant on the council to manage these routes and this behaviour. We are working with our West Yorkshire police partners today. They do have routes up there. They are looking at this antisocial behaviour because it has become so serious in some instances, which is why we're pushing to move and limit the access to it today and continue to work with police on this. This is not about stopping something, it's not about displacing something that's existing. This is all about enhancing the current position, making it safer, putting some limitations in place, and continue to work in partnership with the police about managing this antisocial behaviour. And I think I've probably covered off some of the other routes. You know, everybody who uses these routes will damage them in some way. You know, the 4x4s will damage them in the most way. Next, it will be two-powered vehicles, two-wheel power vehicles, but they create significantly less damage than the 4x4s would. Then your horses, bikes, you know, and pedestrians are probably the least damaging. So everybody does it in some way or form. This is about trying to limit things moving forward.
Thank you very much, Will. Andy Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Andy Wilson. I live in Homebridge and I'm a resident in the Ramsden Road area, so I know it quite well. I have various concerns with the proposed TRO, and these include, firstly, as we've already heard, motorcycle access, the lack of provision for ongoing repairs if we're going to continue with motorised access, risk to equestrians and other users by continued use of motorised vehicles, the cost of administration of any permit scheme, the lack of detail on how any scheme will be policed, and the lack of facilities for use by horse-drawn vehicles. However, I'd like to focus my attention on one particular aspect, and that is that of consultation, and in one particular area, Ramsden Road, which I'm most familiar with. I'll leave others to make the case on the other issues. I think it's fair to say that good consultation is a means by which any proposal is going to achieve its aims. And if you read the objection report, it states, firstly, 3 Kirklees ward councillors were consulted. Now, unfortunately, this isn't accurate. I've spoken with one of these ward councillors who has absolutely no knowledge of this. Had he had that knowledge, he would have consulted with the residents of the area. Secondly, it says local residents and users were consulted. Again, it's not accurate. I am a local resident, and I most definitely have not had any consultation, despite making repeated requests for this. More importantly, my neighbour, who lives and works directly on the route, has not had the benefit of any discussion, despite the fact that he will effectively be locked into his property. He's the wrong side of these gates that are going to be locked. How will he conduct his business? How will he receive posts, deliveries, dustbin lorries, and all the day-to-day things that any resident would expect to be able to get? It's also worth noting that these gates were installed in connection with a failed PSPO, and again, without any consultation as to where they were to be positioned. In fact, information revealed from a recent Freedom of Information request revealed that no consultation in this area has taken place. Bearing in mind that previous attempts by Kirklees to introduce restrictions on this route have failed due to a lack of consultation, I'd have expected this application to have both been wide-ranging and in-depth to avoid previous mistakes. This clearly isn't the case. I have to say, in common with most residents and users of the roads in this area, I am very much in favour of the introduction of an effective TRO that will curtail antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, noise, environmental damage to the roads and the adjoining land. But unfortunately, the proposals as they stand will achieve very little of this. I'm now requesting officers to withdraw the current proposals and conduct effective consultation before formulating a full and a comprehensive TRO proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Would you like to add anything to that, Will, at this moment?
Yeah, and nice to meet you in person, and we've corresponded many times. Yeah, I think what we'll say from a council position is we have a legal and formal set of steps in consulting with TROs that our highways colleagues make sure we follow, and we followed those. So all records of who was consulted, feedback, etc., records of emails sent, letters and things like that we have to be examined by all. So we're quite confident in where we consulted. I think some of the disagreement is in the geography of where we consulted. So someone who we consider as directly affected by this, we consulted. Someone who lives on a road further down, we didn't consult because of their ability to turn around, for example. So I think there's probably just some general disagreement there, which over our processes versus obviously some of the public opinion. In terms of access, if you live on the inside of a barrier, specifically in the Ramsden Road area, it's all key coded. So those people who require access, be those farmers, Yorkshire Water residents, will have a key code managed access and system that our parking team will hold the whitelist off, and we have similar arrangements in other parking areas. In terms of consultation, I know we keep coming back to reconsulting, to going back out again, but my genuine opinion is we'll end up back in the same position with the same level of objections and the same issue, which is a group of people who want nothing with a motor on it and a group of people who want something with a motor on it. What everyone's agreeing is we need to do something. There's antisocial behaviour we need to stop. We need to improve the position as it is today. I think the recommended proposal does that. I think it finds a balance, or tries to find a balance between those who have existing rights of way now versus what we're trying to control in the future, manage the overall safety of people. But it doesn't go as far as some people want it to, and I think that's what's playing out today. But I don't think another round of consultation would change that, and we'd be back with the same gaps as we have today.
Thanks, Will. So I'm going to read out a email received from Will Ather, who unfortunately can't be with us this morning, but I'm prepared to read out his points. So a point I would like to be heard is that a lot of roads are in a bad state of repair, and the amount of money spent grading Ramsden Road seems a waste of money, as the normal roads are hard to keep on top of maintenance and repairs of potholes. Then how is Ramsden Road going to pair up after harsh rainwater and flooding along with harsh frost over the coming years? It will all wash back out and back to how it was when it was used and enjoyed by respectful trail riders as a link trail road onto the Yatehome Reservoir Trail. So that's from Will Ather. So have we got Graham Thulis who may wish to speak? No? Do you wish to speak?
We have done it, yeah. Hi, I'm a resident of New Mill, and we border on Scalergate and Scarrow Lane. And when the concrete blocks were put down, they served a really good purpose and stopped all the fly tipping that went on, all the rubbish that's being thrown into our fields, and knocking the walls down, because they've just been driving right up to the walls. And going up Scalergate, it's virtually impassable now. It's a total disgrace, but when the blocks were there, that at least stopped the 4x4s. And if proper signage was put in down the bottom of Scalergate and at the end of Scarrow Lane, that would improve things probably another further 100%. And it doesn't require any policing whatsoever. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we've had several different opinions from members of the public on this. It's interesting to note this has been going on, I think someone referred to 2007, so we're 18 years into this, and as Will rightly pointed out, if we went out for another round of consultation, I suspect we will get exactly what we've got already, so I don't see any value in going out to consultation. I am surprised where, and I know I know at least I know the two ward councillors very well, the third I don't know, but then when they said they haven't been consulted, I'd be very surprised if that's the case. It may be that one of them is relatively new and wasn't consulted because this process was well on the way to this point before he was elected. So that may be why he hasn't been consulted, because the process had already started. But I'd be very surprised if the other two definitely weren't consulted. It's a matter of principle, certainly in my part of the world, that whenever we do anything to a ward, we always consult with ward council. I'd be very surprised about that. And it does say we have consulted with the statutory bodies, public advertisement, etc. So I think we have done a consultation, and it's always the same with any consultation. You never please everybody. Everybody wants it a wider area or a short, smaller area, or you haven't consulted this person, you haven't asked the right questions. But after 18 years, I think we have a pretty good opinion of what the public feel and where the various vested bodies lie on this. So it's not easy. We're trying as best to try and please as many people as possible, and whatever we do, if we went to a total ban, we wouldn't please everybody. If we go to this what I would call a semi-ban, to allow two-wheel vehicles, we obviously will upset some people, and again, won't please everybody. But this is where we have to make a balanced decision. And I think officers have done a really good job in trying to come to some sort of compromise on how we deal with this challenging road. Will's reference that we have researched this with the local authorities where they've had similar issues, and we believe that this compromise is probably the best way forward. Interestingly, we talk about antisocial behaviour. It's relatively been in the news recently that there's a national problem with antisocial behaviour, and the government are trying to target that. So working with our police, with the local police and our enforcement officers, we will obviously do everything we can to reduce that. But it is, unfortunately, a bit of a national issue at the moment, antisocial behaviour, and I don't have an obvious solution to it, because I don't even know where it's really coming from. We just seem to become a nation of ignoring rules and trying to do what we see fit at the time. Somebody mentioned signage, and I'm sorry, but I don't think signage works. We put thousands of signs up telling people to pick up the dog poop. We put signs up speed limits, and yet nobody takes a blind bit of notice of most signs. So yes, it might be a nice idea, but I don't think it will be effective in this case. The greater signs at putting them up, but how many people take a lot of notice of them? If they took any notice of them, we wouldn't have any speeding problems, we wouldn't have any dog fouling problems, we wouldn't have any litter everywhere. We literally have thousands and thousands of signs, and I don't, apart from reminding people that if they do it, they're going to get caught, and they get caught, we can prosecute. I'm not entirely sure about the value of signs, but thanks for your opinion on that. Councillor Munir, I'll bring you in at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first of all thank all the objectors really for your passionate presentations, which really we have taken on board, and we fully appreciate the concerns from all of yourselves, you know, in terms of that. So that's really appreciated, even though we had them here. Just to listen to yourselves has been really heartwarming to see the passion that all of you have. And all of you have one clear passion, which is antisocial behaviour, and the objections are to make sure that there is a safe route as well. And as mentioned before by the Chair and one of the objectors as well, is that this has been going on for a long time. You know, you're looking at 2007 when it was presented as a petition and also went to the Cabinet. I think the officers are trying their level best to come to a balanced approach, a balanced proposal. It's not going to be the right proposal, and I can tell you that it's probably not going to be the right proposal for everyone. But it is a proposal, and it is a permit, which is a scheme which is a start. And I think people need to look at that and observe it and monitor it and see how it works, and have a look at it in 12 months and see how it works and have a review of that. But I think it's important to have something there to prevent the difficulties that have been mentioned in the report and by the officers, especially Will Aconley. And I think for those reasons, whilst I appreciate some of the very passionate objections, I also understand the concerns in terms of trying to get the right balance. And I feel that the balance that has just been put forward now is probably the right one in the circumstances by the officers. So I would want to obviously propose that we continue with the recommendations that have been put forward by the officers.
Thank you, Councillor. And just following on from that, and thank you very, very much for coming along this morning. I know some of you will have had to give up other things to come and speak to us this morning, and it is much appreciated, because this is a process that where the public should be involved, and it's nice to hear your opinions, and obviously very passionate about what we should do. I do think, though, after 18 years, that if we don't do something, this will drag on for how long, we don't know. But clearly, after 18 years, I think we have to do something. This is a compromise. There's no doubt about that. It's a compromise, and we will not please everybody. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast with our role as councillors and chair of this committee sometimes, that we have to make those decisions, accepting that we won't please everybody, but we try and strike a balance and serve our residents as best we can, and try and allow those that want to use places like this road and allow as many people access to it as possible within the rules around maintenance, for instance. I mean, clearly, £300,000 over 3 years is unsustainable long term for an authority like all local authorities that has limited budgets at the moment. So we have to do something, and as I say, I'm quite happy to support Councillor Ammer's recommendation. And as I said, that is on the understanding, I fully take on board, that this will not please everybody, but this is a compromise, and I think we can review this in 12 months, Will, and see how it's going, and we'll review it in 12 months, and if it's not working, we will ask officers to look at it again and see what else we can come with. But as I said, let's give it 12 months and see how it goes, and hopefully this will solve a lot of problems. Nothing in life solves every problem, I get that, but let's see if we can get the problems as low as possible and please and allow as many people access to this roadway as possible. So thank you very much. So I think we both agree that we'll go with the officer's recommendation, but thank you very much for coming and voicing your opinions. It is much appreciated, generally. If you want, you can leave. You don't have to listen to next time. So we'll move on to item 10, which is Lee Lane. I'm going to find it on this iPad. Right, so this is objection and comments that are received to the traffic calming proposed on Highways Act 1980 on Lee Lane, Honley, stroke Netherton. Which officers are going to present this?
Thank you. So, Children's Services approached Highway Safety whilst they were converting a property on Lee Lane called Magdale House. Through their own internal risk assessments, they highlighted some concerns on the network outside the property in regards to the narrowing the priority area outside that goes around the back of the property towards Old Mall Road, with speeds and just general safety of pedestrians and people using the property or that would be using the property when it's converted to a children's home. We provided a number of different feasible options, and they ultimately decided on cushions, traffic speed cushions. We proposed 2 sets of 2 cushions. On the plan it's features 1 and 2, which were positioned to the north and to the south of Magdale House. This was presented and shared with residents, ward councillors, statutory consultees, and the feedback that we received was from a number of residents asking for further features to be installed on Lee Lane, specifically near to the Wrigley Court Junction and Cocking Steps Lane Junction. That's features 3 and 4. This was based on residents' concerns that our children's services should be providing more for the children that live in the area already, and also to mitigate concerns that were raised with vehicle speeds travelling down Lee Lane. This again was then shared with residents, councillors and statutory consultees, and there was a few comments raised. These were responded to, and the scheme was taken forward as it was seen as an appropriate scheme to progress. It was advertised in the beginning of 2025, so I think it was between January the 6th and February the 3rd of 2025, and we received 1 objection. I believe that the objector may be here today, so they can share their comments, or I can go through it that we received. I don't mind.
Okay, thank you very much. Gary Andrews, is that yourself? Would you like to speak to us? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Gary Andrews. I live on Wrigley Court, and my house is directly adjacent to Lee Lane. My main objection is that council officers are applying different rules and criteria to internal decision making than they do with the public. Kirklees are using statutory powers of the Highways Act 1980, but are not following any of the national best practice processes for planning traffic calming attached to these statutory powers. I believe that elected council members need to hold to account the officers to follow best practice, to demonstrate the need, and by not wasting public money on unjustified schemes. You'll note from the report that unlike the previous scheme that you looked at earlier at the school, there's no justification or need presented for this scheme. No accidents, no fatalities, no injuries, no large vehicle movements, no large numbers of pedestrians or children, no evidence of speeding. This is a small country lane with very few properties off it and very little traffic movement. The report promotes that the objections do not outweigh the benefits of the scheme, but the report does not provide any evidence of the benefits or positive impact of the scheme on the population. The report also doesn't highlight that this exact scheme was rejected by the council previously for lack of justification, prioritisation or value for money. So this is another example of one rule for the public, a different rule when the council wants something to happen, or the children's services want something to happen when it's not justified. The speed limit on this road has recently been reduced when street lighting was installed alongside the children's home refurbishment. I'm not aware that any assessment of the impact of this speed reduction has been carried out at all. And I'm not aware of any assessments on the risk of this road at all that have happened. The scheme hasn't followed any of the best practice for planning traffic calming. There's been no evidence of need, no surveys of assessment of impact, both positive or negative, in terms of noise and emissions, which are the things that are worrying me personally. There's been no prioritisation of this money, this public money, that's being spent against other needs in the Kirklees area. And that was deemed to me to be because Children's Services had a budget and they were requesting it, so we didn't need to follow the rules. So this traffic calming scheme is promoted by the head of Children's Services, who's not the head of Highways, because they have a budget. This budget is available to spend public money on an unjustified scheme despite a massive overspend on the refurbishment, which I'm aware of from a Freedom of Information request, and they're willing to spend this surplus budget on something that they deem is a need that was actually rejected by the council previously. I find this unbelievable. Having a budget should not permit officers to spend public money on unjustified schemes. This shouldn't happen. The scheme was originally promoted with cushions around the children's home, but then extended down the lane with no justification after a request from a resident or residents. It's this extension I particularly object to because it impacts on me and my local neighbours, particularly on noise and emissions. But this impact hasn't been assessed. There'll be no baseline for when I complain in the future if it is impacting on my life. The speed cushions are planning to be right outside my garden, where my patio will be, and that will have a direct impact on my quality of life. If the children's home, in my view, wasn't used as a nice office for staff, there's often 9, 12 cars at the children's home, many days spilling into the lane. They're using it as an office because it's a nice area to be in, and I quite understand the officers wanting to do that. But the car park doesn't meet their needs, and I think they're probably looking at it thinking it's difficult to get in and out because there's 10 cars parked in the car park. If, under normal circumstances, when it's an evening or a weekend and there's 3 or 4 cars, there's room to turn the cars round. So if they didn't use it as a nice office for the staff to meet in, and not to have to pay parking here, or wherever the main office is, they would have facility to turn round. And I believe that if the council are putting a children's home in, which I don't object to, I actually support, and I understand the big savings you get from not sending these children out of area, and I believe in caring for them as close to the homes as possible. But Kirklees should put a car park in that meets the needs of the staff that go there, and not start affecting the environment of the people just because they're overfilling a car park that was put in on the design of the thing, because people are using it as an office way beyond a children's home need. And I don't even think that having 12 cars and adults in a children's home with 2 children is an appropriate environment for those children, but that's a different issue. Because the road safety team have previously rejected this scheme, they've just been unable to provide me with any evidence or reason why this scheme should go ahead, apart from the fact that Children's Services are funding it, so they don't have to follow best practice, they don't have to consider anything, they're just following the orders of Children's Services. In my view, public money should be spent in the best way possible, and Highway Services should take the lead on whether there's a need, do all the impact assessment, and if that is a need, I wouldn't oppose it. It's the fact that they haven't followed process, and they're just following the lead of the head of Children's Services that have thought that it might be a good idea for them to have something to improve the lives of the staff. I think if this scheme goes ahead, and I do complain, there will be no, emissions or noise. How will the council baseline to know what the impact is for the neighbours going forward from this scheme? My concern is that if the council's elected members don't hold council officers to account to follow the same rules and best practice processes as they do for the public, there is a risk of corruption and poor decision making when committing public monies. This scheme has no evidence need, it's not followed the due process, and if it progresses, it will be wasting public money. This is a cash-strapped council making very difficult budget decisions. The money proposed for this unjustified scheme could be used to address much higher priorities in Kirklees, in my view, and that's the basis of my objection.
Thank you very, very much for your thoughts and your presentation and well-presented objections. So, would officers like to respond before I come in?
Thank you. I'd just like to, I've written some of the points down that you've mentioned, and I'll go through them, and I apologise if I've not caught them all. So generally the value for the money and the funding that's been provided, it was provided by Children's Services, and I have no control over that. We are acting as they are the client, and we are the designer of the scheme. We are providing them something. We're providing them a service, and any decision making in terms of the funding and the criteria to provide that funding was with Children's Services completely, and I have no input into that at all, apart from providing the estimates and the feasibility of the scheme that has been proposed. Again, on the public money and the value for money, we're providing value for money on the scheme because we're proposing a larger scheme on the basis of the request from residents, providing those further features as all the machines and everything there that's to put the scheme in, the infrastructure that's there, the workers, everything about it is already there, and going in a second time if it was needed, if it was requested, if it was justified, would cost 3, 4, 5 times as much to put the same thing in. So we're providing value for money by doing it all in one go, as well as on the back of it was requested by residents. So we're listening to what the community have asked for, which answers another one of your points raised. In terms of best practice, we consult on to LTM 107, which I think is traffic calming guidance, and we've followed that in terms of the space and the cushions and everything that we can do. And there are numerous studies that have been released by the DFT in terms of the acoustic performance of different types of features. I think you've been provided with this information before, but cushions are the most effective feature, most feasible feature that we can put in that has the best, has the least impact on noise pollution in the area. If we put any other feature in, the noise pollution from them would be far greater than what would be from cushions. So that has been taken into consideration with the proposal of this scheme. In terms of it being unjustified because of no accidents or no speeding or anything like that, it's not funded from our CRSTS or funding or anything like that, so we don't have to justify it on terms of collisions, and because it's not a highway safety scheme per se, it's come from Children's Services. Again, the funding has been provided from them, so we don't have to meet the same criteria that we have to assess all the other sites in terms of casualty reduction across the network. And I think that answers I've attempted to answer all the questions. The concerns, I think, from the risk assessments were from the approach speeds from Old Mall Road, because that is a national speed limit area. So the approach speed from the top, people, residents, children, anybody leaving that property, which would be on an increase because it is now a larger building that can occupy more people. It's not a private residence. There's the approach speed from coming around the back from Old Mall Road, where the 60 mile an hour unrestricted area is, national speed limit area, presents a danger to residents and people visiting that property because of the lack of footways and just the general geographic layout of that area, which we can't do anything about because of, you know, of funding and everything else. So I think that answers it all.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Can I say anything?
Go on.
I mean, I just wanted to say that, you know, I did say I wasn't opposed to the children's home. I was actually one of the few residents that were supportive of it when they proposed it. But they did say they wouldn't change our environment. They wanted to create a homely environment for the children in that home. They have changed the environment. They've put street lighting in, which, you know, seemed to come to prioritisation at the same time as the children's home. Sort of let that one pass. We had problems with that they put right outside our house. But when you say that you won't change our environment, but then when you get in, all the environment starts to change. And I do feel sorry for Robert. You know, he's been very open with me. He's been very communicative, and he's been, I think, between a rock and a hard place because Children's Service have requested it, and he hasn't had the ability to push back and say this isn't needed. If the council have to spend money, not departmentally, they have to spend money as a whole and say, is this value for money? Not that Children's Services have got a budget and therefore we can put our rules to one side and we don't need to follow the best practice and we'll tie Robert's hands behind his back. This is whatever money it is, it's deferring money from some other high priority. And if it can't be justified by need, it shouldn't be spent at all. And I didn't oppose the ones around the children's home. It is a tight bend. It's a natural break itself. So it does slow cars down. But I can understand it around the children's home. But the extension, that has more impact on noise and emission problems for local residents, which is completely unjustified. So, you know, it was the extension of the scheme that worried me more than the original. And Robert says that the marginal cost is low, but the marginal impact is much greater, you know, the noise and emissions, and that's not even been considered. There's been no assessment, no view of it. And from the reports that Robert referred to, emissions go up by 30 to 40% with speed cushions, and noise pollution goes up by 20 to 25%. Now, if there's no need, why do we have that impact on people? And my house is going to be right outside these speed cushions, so I'm just going to hear bum 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 whenever a car does go over it. And if there's no need, why have it? Why spend the money? Thank you. Sorry.
It's all right. Thank you very much. I admire your passion. Phil, I believe you want to come in on this.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to explain a little bit about this sort of need and the budget and the justification around that, and sort of try and put a point on that, and sort of add a little bit in terms of noise as well. So like I say, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the need, the budgets, the way the budgets are split, and a little bit about the noise as well. I think we've had sort of correspondence ourselves. In terms of need and in terms of the way the budget's split, the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement, so CRS Waste, that Will mentioned earlier, is given to us in the Highway Safety Team. And that comes with a need to justify a reduction and a prevention of collisions and, you know, that WICA put on us and that DFT put on us. In terms of need, I think I mentioned sort of in my email, but any location has the potential to have collisions on there, and any location where there's users on the road has the potential for an accident to occur. And so what the Children's Services have done is they've seen that, they've assessed that, they've analysed that against their risk assessments for users of the Children's Centre, for the residents to be a good neighbour, for them, you know, for coming into the area and to be that good neighbour, and analyse that risk, and also asked us to look at that and taking an approach and a preventative approach to mitigate for the impact that they're adding to that extra traffic and that extra number of footfall around that area. We look at Vision Zero, and I think Councillor Turner mentioned it earlier, you know, Vision Zero when we talked about Woodhouse Hill. Vision Zero is looking at a safe systems approach and looking at different ways and different measures of not being just that reactive that we are having to be in at the moment, but looking at a preventative approach and using opportunities where we can to be preventative, and that's what the children's services are supporting us in, that preventative approach before the unfortunate does happen. In terms of the noise, whilst there is sort of some numbers in there around noise and you know the emissions, overall I think the conclusion of the report that does say that the traffic calming can actually impact have beneficial impacts because of the traffic speed reduction along there. So, you know, when we look at it and when you look at the report and when you look at the approach we're trying to take, it's not, you know, the justification is a little bit different, you know, but that's because the budgets are different, and that's all it is. You know, we are officers, we look to improve and prevent collisions where we can. Children's Services are supporting in that in terms of their risk mitigation and supporting us in Vision Zero, and also they're being a good neighbour moving into the area and trying to improve the area for the residents. So I just wanted to sort of just try and explain the two differences and the reason for the justification, or why it seems like we've previously said no and now we are saying yes, we can do something.
Thanks, Phil. Do you want to come in first or shall I go first? Do you want to go first?
I wanted to thank you for obviously a very passionate sort of response in terms of where you are, but we've also got to look at what has been proposed, and looking at Vision Zero as well is to actually look at the whole of that particular area. I understand that you're quite happy with the cushion proposals around the actual care home itself, you know, in terms of the children's home, but it's actually the extension which is what you're concerned about and going beyond. But in terms of the council's response and the officers, they're having to obviously look at the whole thing in its entirety, and on those bases, any traffic calming measure is always going to have an impact on some people, and unfortunately, because it happens to be directly outside your house, is where the impact is. But that's not because it's been chosen that it's going to be outside your house. It's because there's a technical requirement for it to be there. Is that right? Is that right, Robert? You know, it might be useful just to explain why those cushions have been put in those particular areas, because that's important for yourself to know that, and it's not just been put because it seems to be the ideal place to situate it. There are technical reasons for that. So I think it's important to do that, to give that explanation so that you know why those cushions have been located in those particular situations, you know, in those locations, yeah.
Yeah, so to produce a balanced scheme, you have to space your features appropriately, and depending on what sort of reduction you're aiming for, obviously the closer the cushions need to be, and that's generally the primary view that you take. Secondary to that, you have your environmental limiting factors. So all of the features were considered, including priority giveaways, including full width features, including no features at all. However, if you remove feature 3, for example, which I think is the one in question at the minute. If you remove feature 3, the distance between feature 2 and feature 4, it just encourages drivers to speed up along there. And the number of responses that we got from residents of Wrigley Court asking for that feature to be positioned there because it would help assist them leaving their sort of court, their cul-de-sac. It would improve the safety for their children themselves when walking, because again, there is limited footways around there. So all these different factors are taken into consideration. A priority giveaway, for example, can't be utilised because it has a requirement for a balanced flow of traffic. If there isn't a similar amount of vehicles driving in either direction, it doesn't have any effect on speeds, on vehicles, anything at all. So you know, there has been consideration onto the features and to the positioning of them. Other areas along, so further south, the carriageway is too narrow to put any features there. And like I say, everything's been taken into consideration. There hasn't been just a pick of a spot and that is it. You know, it's been carefully considered and designed to be effective in what its aim is to do, which is to provide a safer environment for the residents of Wrigley Court, Cocking Steps Lane, and anybody else, including the residents and users of Magdale House, but anyone else on the network. Which is why there was a larger consultation as well to make sure that surrounding properties are included.
But there's no evidence of speeding. There's no evidence of speeding. Sorry.
Sorry. Can we
okay.
go to the chair? Thank you. We don't interrupt. Sorry. So I'm going to have my 2 pennies, if you like. So when I read this report, I read it and I thought, I don't think I know this area particularly well. So I did what I normally do these days, is I use Street View and I had a look at it and then went back to the report. And I have to say, it's my opinion, that I was really disappointed. And this is no reflection on officers. As someone, as a ward member, as an elected member since for many, many years now, I have made many requests for traffic calming where there's been evidence and they've been turned down because we haven't the budget. I see, and if you bear with me, I see no evidence in this report that this is an accident waiting to happen. As I said, and I don't like to get parochial about these things, but when I presented things and you go, where's your evidence? And we presented evidence of a certain amount of speeding, occasional accidents, that's not met the criteria. And what worries me, this does not meet what we would normally use as a criteria. No accidents, I checked on the National Crash Map, no accidents, no evidence of excessive speeding. And looking at the road, it is very narrow, and for someone who has occasionally had a speeding ticket, I don't think it's somewhere even high speed necessarily. It's a narrow road. I don't think speed is an issue. There's some blind corners. So I'm struggling to understand the justification for this in our wider scheme of things. And I know it comes from a separate budget, it's not the highways budget, but how do we justify, as has been pointed out by the residents, in a world where money is limited, putting something that is, at this moment in time, a theoretical risk where we don't cover areas where there's been evidence of harm and where we can reduce accidents. So I might agree with the smaller scheme. I certainly don't see a justification for the wider scheme. And that's no reflection on officers. You're simply bringing this to the committee. And this is a case of whereby I'm trying to prove that this is not just a case of things coming in with a rubber stamp. I read all these reports and make a balanced judgment before I come in here. Listen to what the objectives have got to say and listen to what officers have got to say. But I can't see a justification for this scheme because, as I said, I don't think it meets that criteria. It is a theoretical risk. And just going back to your thing about how many officers work there, I have no idea how many officers work there. That's an operational issue and it's not really relevant to this in some ways. But I can't see a justification, personally, for the scheme. I don't know whether you want to add anything to that, Councillor.
I agree with what you just said, Chair, in terms of the speeding and the data that goes behind traffic calming measures. And I think that's important. And there are obviously other factors as a result of this. I think in view of that, like I said, I do share your sentiments in terms of what you're trying to say. In a very narrow road where there is very little traffic and very little speeding and very little accidents, that we're incorporating a scheme like this. I mean, I think it needs to maybe be reviewed again and looked at to see what's probably the right thing to do. But normally, I think the explanation that the officer Robert has given in terms of the justifications from his perspective as an officer is completely correct. You know, it's right in the locations and where they've been put, but it does go against the whole purpose of why these schemes are incorporated, and they are incorporated for the reasons of speeding, accidents, fatalities, and those things are not in there. So in that situation, I think I do agree with the chair that maybe the justifications for this particular scheme is not completely there, other than the fact that the children's services are obviously funding this. That's where it is. So it needs to maybe go back in terms of having a look at this in the most effective way, because is there a need for that? And there needs to be justifications for that before we actually go into any particular traffic calming measures.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, will we come up with a different scheme if he goes back to office is the question. But I'm, as I say, I am going to, my opinion is that I will agree with the objector today, and I don't wish this committee to approve the scheme as it stands. And the opposition probably going away and have a discussion with children's services, etc. Because this is not just about highways, it's about children's services. But if we do come up with something, I would need some information that proves that this scheme is required, rather than it's a nice to have, because it feels a bit to me like this is a nice to have, where we do turn down other schemes where there's definite proven need because we haven't got the budget. So as I say, it feels a bit like it's a nice to have, and I don't think in this current climate that we can go around doing nice to haves when we reject schemes where we will see a positive outcome. So I'm going to propose that we refuse this and side with accept the objections as presented today. Your opinion?
Yeah, okay. I agree with that, yeah.
And I've just said this is not a reflection on officers whatsoever. It's simply my opinion and how I view this. And having read the report and having a look at the roads, I'm not entirely sure that this is... there may be a scheme, but I don't think this is the right scheme for this area, and I don't feel it's being justified with any evidence to back up the decision to approve this. So thank you very much, officers. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that proves that we just don't rubber stamp things. We do listen, and where there's a reason to justify listen to objectives, we will do that. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for those that's attended, both the public and officers, and for those who may be watching online. Thank you very much. We're about to switch the cameras off. So thank you very much, everybody.